video, we have a really interesting list of books that bring up a whole bunch of topics of conversation around counterfeits, print run debauchery, grading companies, ethics involved in manufacturing and selling of comics, misleading comic book listings on eBay. Tons of helpful information in this video. And it all comes from a category on Key Collector called Buyer Beware. So shout out to Key Collector for that category. I think it's really cool that they're making collectors aware of things that they should be aware of here in this hobby. But before we hop into the list, I want to remind you, we always have a monthly giveaway here on the YouTube channel. If you subscribe, comment, and like, you're entered to win a free slab. And if you head over to brycecomics.com and sign up for the newsletter there, you're entered to win a free slab each and every month you stay subscribed. Always new stuff coming through and some really exciting comics currently listed at brycecomics.com. Use code COLLECT10 for 10% off all in-stock items, and that code is always active. And lastly, follow me over on Whatnot. There's a link down below for $15 towards your first purchase on Whatnot. If you're new to Whatnot, we always have stuff in the Buy It Now for $15, so you can stop by and pick up a free book. Let's hop into this list. So you're going to see a lot of themes, recurring themes on this list, and this is coming from this category on Key Collector called Buyer Beware. And I'm really grateful for this category. I think it's cool that Key Collector puts out this information when they see something that they think maybe collectors should be aware of. They put it into this category, and I think it's really cool. So this is Raising Dion. It's an independent comic from 2015, and it explores a widowed mother's journey as she raises a superpowered child on her own. And this has actually been adapted into a TV show. Here you can see it's currently streaming on Netflix. I don't want to get copyright strikes, so I don't have the volume up, but it seems pretty cool. I mean, it's PG, TV PG, imaginative, heartfelt for kids. Maybe I'll watch this with my son. But the comic book, the original comic book, can be printed on demand for $5 from Indie Planet. In other words, there are an unlimited amount of these issues that can be printed at any time through their website. And sure enough, if you go over here to indieplanet.com, you can actually print it on demand, or you can do a digital download for $2.99. And I think that this is really interesting because whoever created this work just wants their story to be read. They probably just want to make cool stories, and they want anyone to be able to read it at any time. But I think to have an indistinguishable print-on-demand version isn't really respectful of the medium of comic books, because comic books, as collectors of comics, we like to have established print runs. We like to know the collectability of a thing. It's not just about cool stories to us. It's also about the physical aspect of collecting comics. And so those things do come into play. So there's obviously a lot of things at play here, because like I said, it's probably no ill intent by the creator. They just want their story to be read. But I would argue that if you're going to break into a medium, you should be respectful of that medium. And for comics and for collectors, maybe have an initial print run through an independent publisher where there's an established print run. And then maybe after that, go to a print on demand and have something on the cover that says second print. But nonetheless, it's not like a crazy expensive book. I mean, here you can see a copy sold from the United Kingdom, so it had like almost $40 in shipping for $80. A raw copy sold for $20, so it's not like it breaks the bank, And in fact, for like $100, if you really love this show and you love this story and you love this cover and you don't want to go through the hassle of printing your own copy here for $5 and then dealing with shipping, and then who knows if it's even going to be in good condition or not, and then getting it graded. I mean, for the price of $100 or best offer, it's almost like a convenience fee, and it's not even really a bad price. And obviously, nobody's getting rich off this, okay? Like, you're not printing money, as people would say, by just buying them on this website, getting them graded, and selling them yourself. I think you'd be lucky to sell one or two copies. And so I don't think there's anyone really, that's taking a big hit here, but it does bring up some really important and interesting conversations about printing comics. And it leads into the next one here, another independent comic that was printed back in 1977, Cerebus the Aardvark #1. And the buyer beware situation here is that there's a counterfeit edition, and it can be identified by a little outline right here in the corner. Here, these two pictures show a really good example of what it is. So this is the counterfeit one, where it has a red outline here. Now, this book is incredibly expensive. Okay, the original first printing of the original 9.4 sold in 2019 for $12,000. So this one does have big implications and big numbers behind it. And this was back in 2019, so it would sell for way more than that today, in my opinion. And here is a picture of a copy that sold on Heritage, an 8.0. This is an original, not the counterfeit. And here's the little spot, that's easy to identify it. But as you can see, I mean, from first glance, it's very difficult. You'd have to zoom in. This one does not have that red outline. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. This is a counterfeit. So here you can see it's really hard to tell with these scans, but there's a little red outline here. I mean, it's hard to tell, but what's interesting is that it's graded by CGC as counterfeit, and it says counterfeit, 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 counterfeit. They put it all over the label that this thing is counterfeit. Now, this raises one really big question, and there's a bunch of other examples and stuff to talk about this, is why is CGC grading counterfeit comic books? Isn't the whole point that they're supposed to authenticate the comic book? In fact, if we come over here to CGC and take a look at the CGC guarantee, we'll see that for collectibles, and they have different guarantees for different collectibles, but for comic books, magazines, lobby cards, and concert posters, the collectible has been inspected by at least 2 professionals, and the collectible is authentic unless otherwise stated on the CGC label. So what they're doing is they're authenticating this copy, this book, as a counterfeit. So they're authenticating a counterfeit. And I don't agree with that. I don't think you should authenticate counterfeit. I think you should reject it. I think that you should have the image that anything graded by CGC is authentic. Don't muddy the water and have it oh yeah, we'll authenticate fakes as well. To me, it just doesn't sit right, but they do have multiple examples of this. This is not a one isolated incident. They authenticate counterfeits. And so it is what it is. It's kind of a topic for another day in that sense. And we have another example of it here. But what it really boils down to and kind of raises a red flag for me, or a question, is how many counterfeits are out there? I mean, yes, this one they're able to identify, but how many comic books in circulation of independently printed, or maybe even Marvel and DC, have slipped through as undetectable counterfeits? I mean, we're talking about paper and ink, right? And I would imagine that the printing process back in the 70s, this is where I'm kind of speaking out of my lane. Maybe the printing press took up an entire room and it would be absolutely impossible to counterfeit that. Or maybe those machines are available and the mafia is over there printing TMNT #1s and Cerebus #1s and making a bunch of money on it. But it does really bring up an interesting point if you're going to drop big money on independent printed comics. If we're talking about $10,000 for this, or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1, yes, I would rather have a CGC graded copy of it, because then, that's one more layer of protection rather than buying a raw copy. But, there's also the chance that, it's certified as authentic and it's not. Now, the extra layer of protection you have if you do buy a CGC graded comic is if it's indistinguishable through the case, like this one, for example. If CGC accidentally graded this counterfeit copy as authentic, and you could tell right through the case, then you have a problem reselling it, because you can identify it. But as long as you can't identify through the case that it's not authentic, you won't have any problem selling it. So if you dump $10,000 into a book like this, or TMNT #1, and it's certified as authentic and it's indistinguishable through the case to not be authentic, then your money's safe, right? So it's an interesting point of discussion, and this example right here leads right into it. It's Gen 13 number 1 from 1995. And this one, it's the counterfeit edition. According to a post on the CGC forum, a reseller purchased a quantity of the standard edition of this issue and was able to successfully apply a gold stamp to the title text. CGC has graded 4 copies of the alleged counterfeit with a blue universal label. So if I understand this correctly, there is no gold variant of this book. It was not published through Image Comics. That this was just an after the fact, a reseller added a gold. It was never distributed as a gold foil. It's just this one guy applied gold foil to this and made his own variant in essence, which is not legal. I mean, this is also like a gray area. I mean, if you buy a comic book, who's to say you can't make art out of it? Who's to say you can't buy a comic book on eBay and draw on it or add stickers or whatever and then sell it? But to pass it off as something that was originally distributed that way, that's where it gets into like a legal territory, or at least, at the very least, a legal gray area. And so here we have an example of a copy that sold, because I went over to GP Analysis to try to find on here. There's no 9.8 sales on GP Analysis. You have to go down to the 9.6, and there is a 9.6 sale for $371 back in 2020. And if you go to the CGC census, you can see that CGC has graded now 6 copies. There's 6 total copies on the census, 1 signature series and a 9.8. So that's super interesting. Did J. Scott Campbell himself sign it and not say anything? Like thinking, like, wouldn't you think, oh, I didn't know there was a gold version of this. Maybe he just didn't know. Here we have a sale of where it sold. It's sold on My Comic Shop, a gold edition, and CGC notates it here on the label as a gold edition, blue label. So they may have thought that this was distributed as a variant, that it came through and they just thought, oh, this is an authentic variant. But the thing is, as a retailer myself, at least for Marvel, you cannot add to the comic book as a retailer, okay? So I'm not allowed to take a Marvel exclusive and add anything to it to make my own variant. This all came to light with Acetate Gate back when a comic shop added an acetate cover to an Ultimate Fallout 4 facsimile and named it as a new variant, the acetate cover edition, without Marvel's consent. And they sent him in to get graded. You may remember this whole controversy, and CGC had no problem grading it. In fact, they even went on record to say, we know what this is, and we stand by our decision to grade this. And then, because of such huge outroar and backlash from the community, they rescinded their stance, changed course, and said, we're now going to give it a qualified label. So technically, any book that's been altered like this, it shouldn't get a blue label. It should get a green qualified label. And the qualification is gold foil stamp added or acetate cover added after manufacturing. It has to be manufactured and authorized for it to be authentic. So this is one that it's just one of those things that from CGC's standpoint, I mean, as a grading company, they do need to have checks and balances in place to be able to identify what was manufactured a certain way and what wasn't, because you can take any number of gimmicks in comics these days, add it after the fact, and CGC, if they don't have a system in place to identify these things, then they're going to make mistakes like this. So it doesn't happen all too often, but and now what's really interesting is Marvel even puts in the deal memos that I signed with Marvel. It says you may not add acetate covers to your comic. You cannot alter the comic after manufacturing, including acetate covers. Like, they just spell it out because of that whole mishap. So this is one where, yes, this is a counterfeit. And what's interesting too is that My Comic Shop knew it was counterfeit. They notated here, counterfeit edition with gold foil stamp added over the title logo. That's kind of weird. Like, if you knew it was counterfeit, why would you even accept it? Like, if I wouldn't take this through my shop. I wouldn't sell it as a gold foil edition. This is a mistake. It in my opinion, you just shouldn't mess with counterfeit stuff. All right, next on the list, we have one that brings up a couple interesting points, and that's this Red Hood and the Outlaws number 25. And the buyer beware here is that it's listed on eBay as scarce and selling consistently for $30 plus since mid-2024. The number of copies in circulation is no less than many other issues in the series that currently sell for $2. It's a Trevor Hairsine cover art. I mean, it's a cool cover, but I don't see why it would be worth more than $2. Not a key issue. There's plenty of copies ordered. It's not like an outstanding cover. It's a cool cover, but not outstanding. So yeah, why? This is what I think is so cool about this, is they're just saying, like, when they see something like this, they go, buyer beware, this doesn't make sense. And if you come over to eBay, you can see there are some things that just don't make sense. Here's the same seller, Jason L. Russell, and you know what? It could be totally legit. There's nothing that spells out shenanigans here, but it does look weird. Here's the two copies that sold for $90. So this is the variant edition of the same issue. $40 from the same seller, $45, all from the same seller for this one. And then here you have one selling for $5. And then you have one that sold at auction for $1, I think it was, when it went to auction. So here, the $1.41 one sold at auction for $1.41. Here's an entire run with that issue that sold for less than just the one issue. So just a bunch of weird stuff. But, you know, one thing's for sure, there's not like a ton of copies of this available for sale. So if for some reason you just had to complete your Red Hood and the Outlaws run, your only options are to pay out the butt. And maybe $30 is like, I can pay $30. Like, I just want to complete the run. So, you know, it's possible that there's nothing really fishy going on here. Here's another one where I think there probably isn't anything weird going on. This is just good old-fashioned supply and demand at work. Miles Morales Spider-Man number 1. This is from 2018. This is the cover A. Back when it came out, there was 60,000 reported copies in circulation. And this was another red flag where Key Collector was like, why is this selling for $100 ungraded? And why is there not a whole lot of inventory listed for sale? Very little inventory selling for $100 ungraded. These are old. This is from a long time ago. He doesn't put the dates of when he posted this, so some of this stuff is like really old. But if you come over to the CGC census, you can see that, it's definitely not a rare book. There's 911 total copies on the CGC census. It's selling consistently for around $100. I mean, $100 was the last sale, 90-day average, 12-month average. 2022 was up to $200. And I just don't think there's anything fishy going on here. I think it's a cool cover with an absolutely one of the most popular characters there is. And it's an issue number 1, and collectors want to collect it. So it makes perfect sense that the people that bought these issues bought them because they want to collect it and they don't want to sell it. And so the people that do sell is like, yeah, I'll sell it for $100, you know, and it's just supply and demand. And if you want to add this to your collection, which almost every Miles Morales collector should and would want to add this to their collection, you're probably going to have to pay $100. So this is one where, you know, it's good to have a mindset of checking things out thoroughly. That's definitely a really good attribute to have as a comic book collector, especially when you see books listed like this one as scarce. All right, because that's like the big red flag here, is if it's listed on eBay as scarce or hard to find or rare, that is a big red flag. And you should have your BS detectors go off anytime you see something on eBay listed as scarce, hard to find, or rare. It could be, but just make sure you check it out and see if it really is. So there you go, guys. I'm curious to hear from you in the comments. What do you think about all of these loaded topics that came up? Is there any topic that, you know, we should dive into a little bit deeper? Let me know down in the comments below. Thanks as always for sticking with me to the end of the video. Don't forget, we always have that monthly giveaway here on the YouTube channel. If you subscribe, comment, and like, you're entered to win a free slab. And head over to BryceComics.com, sign up for the newsletter for your chance to win a free slab each and every month and to get cool comics like this at great prices. Always some cool stuff. We still have that GSX-1 sitting around. Forbidden World 73, the first appearance of Herbie Popnecker. I thought this was a really cool book. Obviously a little bit more niche, but I appreciate you guys sticking with me to the end of the video, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye.